Mr. Speaker, racism as a whole, it basically goes against any notion of human rights where a certain particular minority is beat down upon, is marginalized, and basically they aren't given the same opportunities as any majority in this country. Now we see this problem being especially prevalent in the country of France, where the black community as a whole, essentially they are being marginalized, where their rights are being infringed on. Not only is their safety as being citizens in any country, in that country being compromised, where basically there are acts of violence against these people. Why? Because essentially they are being discriminated against. The majority Caucasian people within France basically don't agree that the blacks should be there and should have the jobs of the French people, essentially thinking that they are not French. And we think that is an issue, because when they are discriminated against, they are not only, their security as human beings which are entitled to any person is not only being ensured, but also, for example, jobs, the same job opportunities are not being given to them. Because the French people essentially do not want to have these blacks in the workforce and discriminate against these people because they don't think that they are deserving of this thing. So we must recognize that status quo does have a severe problem of racism, and we must combat this racism. So why is it very important to limit racism or try to remove it entirely? Now we must see that it is important to ensure that every single citizen in any country is happy, is cared for, and that is the role of a first world government. So we think that it is the onus of the government to ensure the welfare of all its citizens, any minority or majority race in question. But before I go on, yes sir.
So how would Ghettoism combat racism?
Now, of course, that would be answered in my second substantive, because we must recognize, actually my second speaker speech, because firstly we must recognize that current methods don't actually work, and we must implement a more radical solution where it would actually provide some level of limiting the amount of racism. So first, back to my main point, why is it actually so important to limit racism? Because it's the onus of any first world democracy to ensure the welfare of all its citizens, to ensure that equal rights are being given to all its citizens. So if next we must look at why these current methods of integration, of organic change basically aren't working. Now the black community in France basically has existed for decades, yet we see such prevalent cases of racism still happening. So we don't think that education or forcing that integration with current legislation is actually working, because that same cases of racism essentially still are happening. This shows that clearly current methods aren't working here. So what must we do? We must go with our policy of ghettoism, where essentially we are having separate communities where the blacks are able to congregate and form their own homes. Essentially what this does is it provides a certain level of security. It reduces the cases of discrimination, because essentially there aren't people to discriminate against them in that area. And we think that that essentially would be an effective policy to deal with this issue of racism, where the blacks are able to congregate in a certain area, are able to practice their religion and their culture essentially to a whole. Yes, ma'am?
What about jobs? Don't they still have to go out to the white community and seek jobs? I don't know.
No, okay, thank you, ma'am. Now we see when these blacks are able to congregate and basically able to interact with each other, we think that they are able to fight for their rights on another level. Because essentially when they are brought together and they recognize that there are big problems in their community, essentially with those people not being given jobs, these people are given a voice. And when they are able to form a big enough group to get a voice, we think it is crucial for them to be allowed to have this voice and then fight for the jobs that they need to. And then fight against discrimination, because we need that whole organization as a whole for the black community to basically come together and be able to fight for this right. Because that is not happening in status quo, where the blacks' voice are basically being silenced. So we think that ghettoism as a whole would be the proper solution, and gathering the black power, for example, would be the only way to fight racism for now.